All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're very pleased to welcome you to our session. Now, over the course of the next 60 minutes, we will try to attempt to answer this question. If you were offered a deal to climate-proof your city, but it increased the bills by 10% in the next 10 years, would you still take it? And we'd like for you to leave this session with a couple of practical tactics and tips on maybe how to model the tariff path or potentially design the perfect finance blend or even, figure out the best way to do the due diligence. So let's start with my speakers today. Please tell us your name, where you sit, and what's the one belief that you've brought to this conversation. Hala, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Yulia. My name is Hala Hamawi. I'm a PhD candidate in my final year at Nottingham Trent University, but I'm also a climate finance senior associate at Global Green Growth Institute. One belief I'm bringing is that policy and science are important, yet they are insufficient to address climate change. So we need finance.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. George?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Julia. My name is George Wainaina. I work at IAVAG at the SANDEC department. IAVAG is the Swiss Federal Institute for Aquatic Sciences and Technology, and I'm a research group leader focusing on how water organizations can optimize their activities and structures in order to anticipate climate impact. One belief that I come in is that utilities, which are forms of organizations, and funders should develop capabilities to engage better in order to ensure that climate finances flow towards the water supply and sanitation sectors. Yep.
Thank you. Now I think I'll hand over to our utility, Dr. Rose.
Thank you very much, Julia, and hello to everybody. I'm Rose Christine Kagwa. I sit in Uganda at the National Water and Sewage Corporation, but I also serve as the Senior Vice President for the International Water Association and the current chair for the GWOPA Assembly. I'm happy to be here. One belief I would like to bring to this discussion is the need for utilities to be more proactive and innovative in tapping into finances that are available through the climate financing to be able to ensure that we derive and ensure access for all. I think we all know that many of us are off track for SDG 6, and we really need to be proactive and innovative to get the financing that we need to get movement on ground. Thank you.
That is very, very true. And that's why we also have our two funders with us. I think let's start with you, Najib.
Thank you so much, Julia. My name is Najib Bateganya, Deputy Director with the Water, Sanitation and Hygiene team here at the Gates Foundation in Seattle. At our team, we know that we have the solutions that can deal with the increasing service gaps in water supply and sanitation. And we know that with innovative financing, innovative utilities, innovative deployment of resources, we are able to bridge the gap between those that are underserved in the world and those that have too much already. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. All right, then last but not least, Dr. Amgad, over to you.
Thanks, Yulia, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with everyone and the distinguished speaker here. So my name is Amgad El Mahdi. So I am the regional manager for Middle East and North Africa with the Green Climate Fund. Coming from a hydrologist background, I think what belief I wanted to bring today for the discussion is really like, as Hala said, like we need finance. So we are here as a finance, but I want to really to say like, or to stress on the role of the climate finance to really ensure two main things. One is really the bankability, so allow utilities to access finance, but also affordability, which is really like maintain the water tariff and reduce the cost on the end user or the customer. Thank you.
Thank you. So everybody, as you can see, we have quite a collection of different perspectives today, academic perspective, utility perspective, and funder perspective. But now we actually want to gauge the audience who is with us here today. My colleague will actually share a link with you just now in the meeting chat and also present the main question. Thank you.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So for the first question for our polls today, we would like to know, what do you think is your biggest obstacle when you think about raising finance for climate resilient water projects? I have shared the link to this poll in the chat, and I can also, I have the QR code here, and you have 4 options to choose from, and I will start 2-minute timer from right now. Okay, it seems like, okay, we still have more.
Very even spread, huh? But what do you think?
Yeah, but I think for option 2, we have like the highest voters for now. I think 2 would stay like the highest voted option.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Give it a couple of more minutes. Yeah, Hala, actually, what do you think of these results?
Well, I'm not surprised at all. Like, first, I see them all valid, but depends on from which perspective are you talking, right? So if you are in an institution where there is limited staff capacity, certainly that will be your biggest issue. But and I think it is the highest at the moment. I think it's across
Perfect.
institutions in developing countries, so it's not really surprising.
Actually, I can see that our second utility has joined us. Sia. Thank God you came. Maybe you can, while we're still waiting for the responses on the poll, you could quickly tell us your name, where you sit, and what's the one belief that you bring to this conversation.
Thank you very much. I must apologize for joining late. For some reason, I had challenges joining the call, but I'm here now, and I'm glad to be here. I think, firstly, from my side, the belief that my name is Sia Basha from Water and Sanitation in the city of Cape Town, Water and Sanitation Department. I led a commercial services section of the directorate. My belief is that resilience is not just technical, it's also financial. I do strongly believe that if we do not model affordability early on, we will lose the public before we even start with building that resilience. So that's definitely the belief that I bring on the table. And from my side, really, the number that is always in my head and also engaging with our treasury team within the city of Cape Town is 15, which I believe is a fair and the middle ground when it comes to the tenure of financing that will enable us to really soften the price path and considering, of course, interest and other factors that we take into consideration.
That's interesting, huh? And I think then, having now seen the results of the poll where the capacity seems to be the biggest constraint, I will let our two academics actually start this conversation, starting with you, Hala, in response to what you've seen and what you've heard so far.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julia, again. And I just wanna, reiterate that the session is really seems to be fruitful because it's bringing different voices from different type of institutions and around, obviously from different part of the world as well. So when speaking about climate finance, I feel it's really within the water sector, it is a very timely and much needed topic at this point. From my humble experience across both the water and climate finance sector, I've noticed that colleagues in the water sector usually view climate change as a separate, topic from water. And that the basics of climate finance can appear like a complex puzzle to piece together. So I think there is a lot of room for us to enhance awareness and knowledge about climate change and climate finance by actually simplifying those topics and make it more accessible to everyone in the sector. It's similar to the way we build our understanding about global issues around the world. So what is climate finance? So climate finance is finance, right? But it is targeting projects and activities that contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing resilience to the adverse impact of climate change. And this is a very simplified definition, right? But when we are talking about, funding those activities, the activities themselves depends really, they are really contextual. So depends where you are in the world and what is your needs and what is the available resources you have. So for instance, myself coming from Jordan as a water scarce country, my needs to be more resilient and the time of more often drought is so different than, for instance, Julia, you sitting in Germany with the wealth of rain exists and potentially more frequent floods, right? However, when we talk about climate finance, there is a legacy behind where it came from and how it emerged. And basically, it's based on global climate agreements, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as Paris Agreement. However, that does not mean that climate finance was not there before, or finance for environment related to climate change was not there before. It was there, but it was usually under development, specifically environment category, right? Why I'm saying this? Because currently governments in developing countries, they usually they have spending on climate finance as well, targeting those activities. However, unfortunately, in many of our countries, we don't have proper tagging system, including a proper taxonomy for green taxonomy and climate taxonomy as well. So where this money comes from, it's from everywhere, starting from individuals at households, then from the private sector, as well as multilateral and bilateral development and financial institutions. But we usually, or nowadays, we associate the climate finance more with the climate funds. The well-known one that emerged from the UNFCCC, including the Global Environment Facility, the Adaptation Fund, as well as the largest among them, the Green Climate Fund. And we're lucky to have Dr. Amgad with us on this session. The approach to access the funds is different among those, the three climate funds. And it's usually through what we call accredited or implementing entity, depend what funds we are talking about. So there is different mechanisms. So what I'm trying to say, there is a mechanism to unlock finance, whether from those climate funds or other resources. And I'm just gonna give a last example here. When we talk about unlocking finance from private sector, we need to have what we call an enabling environment from policies, incentives, you call it, to enhance or encourage investments in climate responsive projects. And this is in brief. And I think it's time for George to add his input. Dr. George, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much, Hala, and thank you, Julia, for this. Well, it was very interesting to hear the definition that you have of climate finance, because the definition sets space to a lot of things. And also the poll has shown us that capacity is quite an issue, and that's a place where I come in squarely. But I tried to look at it beyond the capacity of the individual and go to the capacity of the organization. And so the capacity of the organization is basically the capability of the organization to do a certain thing. And in this case, we are looking at accessing, using, and making it an organizational culture or strategy to include climate finance as part of the portfolio for the utility to acquire some form of funding that complements the tariff, in essence. And we are seeing a lot of challenges between funders and utilities. In essence, the funders face one challenge, that sometimes they're not aware, they are not able to target the utilities very well, because sometimes utilities are either very small in essence, and sometimes could be very risky to invest in terms of perceptions, among other reasons. On the other hand, utilities lack the capabilities to actually be seen or be able to absorb the funds or even to find the funds. So in this essence, quickly to highlight, I find that utilities need a suite of capabilities, and there are three of them, and they're in three categories. Those are the sensing capabilities, so how to find the funds themselves where they are, how to find the right partners, and how to monitor policy changes to identify windows of opportunity for getting the funding. The second category is seizing these opportunities. Utilities need to develop capabilities to seize these kind of opportunities. So here it means you need resources to develop bankable proposals to bring these kind of opportunities in. Develop teams that can do this kind of proposals and invest in the right digital infrastructures for accountability for this kind of proposals, so that you can increase your chances of understanding, your chances of actually acquiring and leveraging the opportunities. The last one is opportunities for reconfiguring, and this is where utilities then have to change their organizational structures or transform them, their organizational structures and processes, and how they allocate resources. They also need in this category to learn more in a systematic way on what is happening within their environments and integrate sustainability into their strategies. So in this essence, then it means it's a team of people that sort of come in, they either come in and develop new capacities within the teams that you have to actually respond to this kind of opportunity that has emerged.
I see. So it's a combination of things that need to be considered, huh?
Yes.
I wonder how it has been for our utilities here on the ground. Has it also been your experience, Dr. Rose?
Yes. Thank you very much, Julia and George and Hala, for those thoughts. I think when it comes to climate attracting or looking out for climate financing, utilities have found it rather difficult because at the moment we tend to focus a lot on the need for infrastructure. And when you look at how we are considering issues of access, increasing access to water, and even if it's sanitation, we tend to think more infrastructure, either improving what we have or looking at new infrastructure. Now, climate change, we know, is affecting us in so many different ways, but it's not been so easy for us to look at opportunities through the climate finance that is available. Also, possibly because we need to do this in a more holistic manner and have multi-sectoral approach to attracting climate financing. When we look at just this morning, reading about the hurricanes and the storms that are coming through in Asia, and hearing today that there could be almost 300 millimeters of rainfall in just a short time, I quickly looked at what that would mean for us, and saw that in a month we have an average of 542. So if Kampala woke up with that amount of rain today, nothing would survive. And it's looking at that and embedding climate change in our planning, and therefore knowing that whatever we are going to do, whether it is major infrastructure or minor infrastructure, if it's improvements, if it's rehabilitation, if it's new construction, we need to bring in the aspect of climate change, and also know that we can't do this as utilities on our own. We need to look at a bit more multi-sectoral, and also, of course, then look at other aspects that are being discussed on how we build the capacity to do that. Because prior to the past, nobody really went to school and studied climate change or even had resilience in terms of the scientists, the engineering. This is something that we have now come to face when we're in the practice field and when the realities are beginning to hit us. And I think utilities need to think more about that. I also relate it a lot to water security. When we talk about water security, people tend to think about abstraction, cubic meters per day, and then also think about the 1 in 100-year flood or 1 in 40-year flood. And in the developing countries, these are things that we seem to want to push away or think that it will happen once a year and we'll always recover. When we think about the actual day zero that Cape Town went through, for many, that's not our reality. And I think that's an issue that we really need to look out for. And therefore, of course, now I pass to Cape Town, who has had that real experience of having a day zero. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rose. I mean, I think the Cape Town story, I need to start there. It's a known story. One thing for us that I can confirm from the Cape Town point of view was that it was a wake-up call. Not just a wake-up call to ensure that we've got the water security, but it was a way to say that we need to build finance resilience. We needed to ensure that we shift our mindset from short-term crisis management to saying, how do we ensure that we have a system that is looking long-term, and then it's got drought proofing in the mind. And so with that, I'm not sure who in the call is aware of it. Then the city went on to write what we call a water strategy, our shared water future. And with that, we built some form of commitments that start from saying that we will ensure that we have safe access for water to all or for all. And then at the same time, we will look at ensuring this ambitious plan to becoming a water sensitive city by 2040. And with that in mind, what we've realized quickly was that at the heart of it all, of all these plans and ambitious plans of diversifying our water resources and becoming a water-sensitive city, there is quite a cost issue. And then we found that all this diversification and ensuring that we drought-proof our services comes at a cost. And we realized that cost must be reflected into the tariffs that at the end of the day then impact our end users. So one thing I can say in this call that we've done the hard mile in terms of analyzing what is important that we need to do to ensure that we do not face another day zero. But at the same time, how do you in this time sensitize your users in terms of what is coming and what would be the impact of those tariffs? So what we did is, and I'd like to share, is that we had a modeling. We performed some long-term financial modeling where we modeled affordability. And then we also looked in terms of our financial plan that informed the funding strategy, the options of funding sources that are available in the market, and also the long-term plan really informed the negotiations that take place in order to ensure that we attract the necessary funding. But I do want to say with that, we've identified that there are risks or there's cost implications that are linked to these water diversification. And then we quickly started looking, and we're currently exploring the possibility of using PPPs, your private public partnership funding as an option, because we look at it as the way of trying to ensure that not all the investments are funded out of the balance sheet in order to try and reduce the impact on your consumers. But what we quickly that I'd like to share, Yulia, is that we found that all of these things, they don't come free. There is no free money. I mean, I want to say this in front of some of the funders that we've got on the call. There's no free money, because at the end of the day, whatever funding you attract is going to have an impact on the cost of services, and you need to reflect that and recover that through the tariffs. One thing that we've realized as well, the importance of blending. There is a room, and it's a call for Cape Town. We go out and attempt to find more grant funding, because we see that there is a need for grant funding, not only to co-finance the big project and infrastructure, but to assist us with contract readiness in order to reduce the impact on our tariffs at the end of the day and our operational cost. So it's really a moving a balance between ensuring that you recover the cost, to ensure that you reduce the impact in terms of the cost to the end user, and to ensure that you've got a sustainable service and continue to provide the service to the city of Cape Town users and citizens. I'll leave it at that for now, Yulia, and take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, what really stuck with me, of course, is what you said, is that there's no free money. And I think this concerns both, climate finance and also PPPs, because we all know what happened in Kigali, right? And that's why I'm so happy that we have actually Dr. Amgad here with us on the call. Maybe what's your quick reaction to what you've heard now from Sia? What do you think?
Thanks.
Yulia, maybe before Dr.
Mhm.
Amgad comes in, I just wanted to add one thing
Yes, please.
regarding the utilities, because we talk a lot about boundaries and at where do utilities lie with regard to the climate financing and ensuring that, in our case, for example, there's water security. Again, depending on where you're sitting, we will normally find that utilities are not responsible for the catchments. They may do a little on source protection, and that, again, as I said, needs a more multi-sectoral approach. And one of the key elements that I'm hearing from the story of Cape Town is the issue of the capacity gaps, the ability for utilities to have in-house capacities to bring in the issues of climate resilience. And that at the moment is missing in most of ours, because you will find that the people who plan are the engineers who are looking at planning and capital investment. You will find that occasionally they'll throw in a few environmentalists, but that is mainly because they're looking at impact assessments. And we end up losing, right, even from the planning stage, the need to bring in climate resilience. And lastly, I think before we go to the funders, of course, then this relates a lot to the plans that are being put in when it comes to financing grant versus loans. We'll find that the appetite for loans is really reducing in many of our countries. And we have to justify why you would need, for example, to match in the blended finance a grant with a loan. And the needs will then revert to those that are basic. In fact, first, improve access. If you want to make a source more resilient, then the costs for construction go higher. And at the end of the day, you'll be told there's no money. So there'll always be that shortcutting to just giving it as it is now and not looking for the future aspects of resilience. I thought I needed to mention that before Dr. Amgad comes in. So over to him. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Rose. And yeah, I think it's listening to Sia and Cape Town and also Rose and take that operator perspectives. I think it's, I wanted to start by saying really like utilities are really like on the front line here, and they face really a real tariff sensitivity, limited physical space, and often really like a long-term approval timeline as well that could really impact their balance sheet. But from fund perspective, I think our challenge is really how to design the right financial structure that really keeps resilience affordable while still mobilizing significant capital and deliver on climate impact. And let me start by some numbers here. I think from experience, particularly in like fragile or vulnerable economies, like in Africa or in the Middle East as well, you typically find or need around at least like between 30 to 40% of financing to be in grant. And that's really to keep average household bill stable over like around 10 years, but also below that level, if we lower the scale of grants, the cost sometimes is always like passed to the customer, and that again the affordability questions become very political and social unsustainable as well. But if we take it from really like who actually can lead those applications and can really manage to access that finance, I think it's a Hala already mentioned that, but like cities and utilities are really like the ultimate beneficiaries of that climate finance for water utility or for water security investments. And through the climate fund, really like the right entity to lead that, it's an accredited partner institutions or an accredited entities, and that really like a development bank or a multilateral banks or multilateral entities or even national entities. And the reason really is very simple, because those accredited entities that being screened by the Climate Fund or by GCF, they are already like having that fiduciary system, the track record, the ability also to crowd in private finance. But the utility role here is still absolutely central for that accessibility as well, because without their ownership of the design and also the climate rationale they provide, the proposal will not be really successful. But also, if we look at the timeline, in terms of the timeline, how long it takes to really access climate finance, assuming you have the utility, you have the right information, you put the right financial structure, you have the accredited entity that has the ability to access that finance. I think it would, like, to be fair, we really talking around like between 12 to 18 months to be able really to have like a full access of that finance and go through all the appraisal process. And the reason really for that, it's not I'm glad with the first poll, like that shows again lacking of the capacity, but I think it's hard to differentiate or to separate lacking of the capacity and meeting the climate fund requirements. I think both are really linked together, very clear. And I think like it's a challenge, but it's not impossible. And I want to give one example. I think I have seen in the chat here a question from a colleagues from Algeria asking about, is there any water utility managed to do this? Is there any successful? And taking we have Cape Town with us, Saya. I want to really to reflect on one of the largest water security project that's being funded by GCF in South Africa. It's 1.5 billion project, and with partner with like Development Bank of South Africa, and that by really designing a program that allow water utility in South Africa to access a very cheap capital to do their wastewater reuse, rehab or expansion and infrastructure as well. And that really give the opportunity for water utilities in South Africa who really face again under very high financial pressure to be able really to go and access that very cheap capital that we managed to create by putting our finance, de-risk that investment, taking the upfront loss, and partner with the right entity like Development Bank of South Africa, and be able really to mobilize and crowd in other financial institutions.
I would actually ask Sia to respond to that, but before Najib, maybe can you also come in and also react to what you've heard from the two utilities so far?
Thank you so much, and thank you, colleagues, for those contributions. You clearly see here that utilities and cities are at the front line. And more than ever, I think we are at a tipping point where utilities and cities are going to make critical data-driven decisions around expanding services and not just services that are reliable and that are of good quality. Cities are expanding. On one side, you have developments in urban settlements, industries that demand more services, while on the other hand, you have poor informal communities that also require these services. One of the critical points I note, especially from the two cities, is having critical data. I think for me, what we are talking about here, cost, infrastructure planning, targeting funding from donors will all require critical data from these utilities. And that means we have to increasingly build capacity in utilities to have risk-informed planning, to make sure that while all these projects, like my colleague from Climate the Climate Fund is talking about, will require very, very, very strong data points that aggregate bankable projects towards the credible, accredited institutions that negotiate these funds. So I think from the Gates Foundation, for example, we work a lot with the multilateral banks, World Bank, Africa Development Bank, to provide catalytic funding that enables de-risking for some of these projects for sanitation, especially, and also water efficient services for the people. But you realize most of the cases, the utilities or governments are not able to provide what the funders call bankable projects, because some of the times you do not have the capacity to turn around some of the ready projects to finance. And secondly, sometimes you don't have very critical data points, for example, that inform what bankability should be. So largely, I think we need to continue supporting some of these utilities. We need to continue supporting the municipalities to first of all build their own capacity and ensure that they are able to have their own capabilities in maximizing domestic resources, domestic plans that are risk-proof, but also that integrate resilience for both medium and long-term financing. I will pause here to allow others to come in. Thank you for those
Thank you,
contributions.
Najib. I think while I ask Sia to respond to what she's heard so far, maybe my colleague Batul can share the second poll she has already, I can see. In the meantime, Sia, what do you think so far, what you've heard from, especially from Dr. Amgad when it comes to blending finance?
I really think we need to have a clear and open conversation here. And I do want to start by saying that, yes, in the city's point of view, we will continue exploring the funding sources that are currently available to us. But there's one key thing on one key issue that we normally assess and look at is the cost of borrowing, is to assessing in terms of the interest that are being charged for that, the tenure of the loan, knowing, considering that the longer it's more costly, but at the same time you need to really find that sweet spot. And then to also really see what will provide the real benefit to the city and to the city's consumers in that effect. Because at the end of the day, what is available on the market needs to reduce the cost of service, needs to talk to affordability, and also need to talk to our long-term plans. Currently, I do want to say that we do receive quite competitive and attractive loans from our DFIs. And at that stage, some of the projects that we fund through those loans, they tend to focus around climate change and also climate adaptations. So you have seen in a way that they assist us both for water and for sanitation in order to ensure that we build as a resilient service. So I do want to say, as much as we say that, let's give examples of where these have been successfully implemented. I do want to say, although we know they're available, what is important when you go and obtain loan within a utility point of view, knowing that at the end of the day, there has to be cost recovery, you need to ensure what is the perfect sweet spot in ensuring that the interests are relatively lower than below than the market. And then also you've got a tenure that allows you to reduce that impact on your consumer. And then at the same time, you're able then to really improve your impact on your customers while you improving and building resilience of your services and also on your financial sustainability. That's why I made a reference to say, as the city, we saw that we're not able to include all of our projects under the balance sheet. That's why we're exploring PPP as another vehicle that we could explore. But if there is a loan that is available there that could allow us to reduce the impact, definitely we will always explore those available funding sources, because we do feel that the city's credit rating does put them on a good standing to be able to attract fairly competitive funding. Thank you.
No, that's a really good point, actually. And as we can see now, it's actually an even split when it comes to a blended package. Well, not an even split, but definitely the long-term impact and the flexibility of the terms and conditions seems to be the most preferable. I wonder, Hala, if that's also been kind of the experience that you've had also with your research, if this result is not surprising to you.
Thank you, Julia. So I'm going to take the highest score and speak about it, which is the flexibility of funders' terms and conditions. And I want to just revisit what Dr. Amgad emphasized on, that it goes hand in hand with the capacity building, right? And the perhaps also the institutional capacity in matter of available resources from staff and other things. So while we usually say there is, let's say the GCF or the World Bank, conditions, and I'm not trying to pick a specific funds, but they have, terms and conditions for, providing funding. But also we understand that there is limited institutional capacity, and building this institutional capacity to meet those terms and conditions, we need to think about of an investment, a long-term investment. So you are not only meeting those terms and conditions, you are meeting also other funder, like those specific financial institutions. But by doing the highest standards, you are also meeting other funders. And I'm not trying to say that we need, to reach that point, but also financial institutions over the time, they do a lot of, restructurings for their terms, for their conditions. They provide, for instance, the GCF provide a readiness project to develop the capacity of institution. So we need to use those opportunities to build our capacities. Yeah, that's it on this. Thank you, Julia.
No, Hala, that's a good point. And I wonder, George, if you in your research have come across anything that could build those capacities, let's say in the next 90 days, like if it was up to you, what would you actually do you think? Like what would make the most sense? And I actually encourage maybe Dr. Rose and Najib to think about the same, because I'll turn to you next.
This is a good question in terms of what do we do within, let's say, the utilities or the funding agencies. So for the utilities, I think the first thing is to establish what capacity are you really missing and how does it speak to the overall, so how does the individual capacity of the people within your utility speak to the overall organizational capacity, because these are two different levels. And Dr. Rose highlighted something very interesting, that you can hire a lot of you can hire an environmentalist in your team to do EIAs, but that doesn't mean that you are able to also access, let's say, other types of financing, because it is just one person who thinks about one specific thing. But then, as I said earlier, this has to be looked into as a suite of capabilities that the whole organization needs to have, and not just hiring one grant officer and thinking that now you are ready as an organization to maybe scout for funding and access it and use it. But it's more of thinking along the whole chain of people who have the capability to search for the opportunities, teams that have the capabilities to build up proposals that speak to the opportunities, and teams that are able to include this, or leadership that is able to include this as a routinized process within the strategies of the utilities. So in other sense, it's thinking a bit more like business organizations. And I know this is a bit different for water utilities because of A lot of times the complement to the tariff is the subsidy, but now we see public funding is declining also, and therefore this is a capability that utilities need to develop of seeking funding from outside.
Thank you. What's your take, Dr. Rose? What's the one thing that maybe National Water or another utility could do like tomorrow to improve their capacity to access climate finance, in your opinion? Oh, you're muted.
That's not a very easy question to respond to, because I think running through my mind was, for any proposal to be written well and to address the issues, we need data. And we'll find that in most cases, we are looking at how much have we produced, how much have we treated, how much have we sent out. And at times you find that there are gaps when it comes to understanding your sources and looking at, for example, your levels in your dams, in your lakes, your river flows, and trying to even look beyond your abstraction point. So one of the challenges, and I think that's why many times we fail to get through with these bankable proposals, is that our data at the moment is not speaking to our need to be more resilient. And if you ask me within 90 days, are you able to clean up and get the information you need? The answer may be no. And that would mean we need to then reach out to the other players within the sector. And I did mention that, for example, in our case, we would need to be working very closely with the Water Resources Management Department in the Ministry of Water and Environment. And those links at the moment are not there. So not strong enough in terms of putting together these proposals. I think utilities will need to work on more integration, more sectoral, multi-sectoral approach in terms of addressing some of these proposals. And then the other one is, again, changing the mindset of bringing in George mentioned the business side, the economic side, because when we begin to talk about tariff, that's what we look at in terms of cost of the investment. But I would also think we need to do more planning that is not just short term, because utilities tend to reach out for low hanging fruits. So you want the quick fix. And the minute you begin to talk about medium to long term, it becomes a bit of a problem. So the other area is then to bring in our actual master plan planning for all our areas of operation, and looking beyond the just now and thinking what would happen, in the next 15, 20 years to come, what is going to happen within the space. I think those are some of the areas I would like to, and then of course, on the strengthening and the linkage between the engineers, the environmentalists, the scientists, the modelers, all that needs to be integrated together so that the team that is thinking through the proposal is not just a civil engineer sitting somewhere, but, working in a group to work out the requirements that are required for these proposals. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that is true. And I think also like the lived experience like of water insecurity should also be considered, right? So it's not just technical cubic meters per capita, right? And I wonder, Najib, because I think Gates Foundation also works with aspects, like more innovative solutions, nature-based solutions that should also be explored as a capacity in the utilities. Is that something you can also elaborate on?
I mean, for me, what I could add is capacity is not just about snapshot training, so diagnostic assessments and quickly fix what is not working or what we want. For example, we would be here jumping to, can we build capacity of utilities to write proposals or stuff like that. All these are critical and are important, but in the end, it's all about the utility, organization maturity, incrementally growing those capabilities, systems, processes established in place to actually enable and maximize the potential of the human resource that you have within the organization, from my point of view. And I will give a very practical example that Dr. Rose, and I think Sia also pointed to it. For many of the things utilities and urban authorities or cities do, they need data. And I mean, it's almost everything that you need to decide on, from tariff. How do you decide tariff adjustments and forecasting? That requires, or modeling, that requires very, very systematic data systems established in place, which you can base on to think about such decisions on tariff adjustments. When you go to infrastructure, the same. If you go to service delivery, the same. So in my intervention, and we've worked with many regional organizations, and because we do not directly implement, but we work with partners, global and regional organizations, to support utilities and urban authorities or service authorities to build this kind of systematic approach towards capacity building that focuses on organizational or utility maturity, to establish robust systems that are able to maximize the potential of the human resource there, and eventually, anyway, these systems and processes, once established, and once you build a very strong organization maturity, you're able to build strong performance capabilities that maximize revenue, increase performance efficiency, and eventually the balance sheet improvement that GCF talked about. That is, I think, for me, foundational and fundamental, and more critical more than ever right now.
Thank you, Najib. Dr. Amgad, I actually saw you nodding a couple of times there. Maybe you can comment, and then, as we only have a couple of minutes left, after you, I will let George close, because I see that he has raised his hand.
Sure. Thanks, Yola. So I wanted to really add a point, like you talked about the innovative finance, and one of the innovative finance, it's a blending finance. But I wanted to make sure, like everyone understanding, blending here, it's not just blending the financial instruments like grants or loans and so on, but it's really blending financial instruments and concessionality terms when you speak about climate finance, because climate finance really bring concessionalities. And we have seen different structures where you can have like 40% grant, 60% of like concessional loans that really can come with 15 or 20 years of payback with up to 5 years grace period, and also lower interest rate, because that's the power of the climate finance. But also the grant by itself and concessionality terms doesn't really solve the problem. You also need really like a risk coverage for like foreign currency as well, that we have seen in many developing countries. So I just wanted to close here by really look at the climate finance as enabler. So it's not the only money that's there, but it's really an enabler finance that can really leverage other financial, because it come very cheap in terms of its cost, but also able to de-risk other investment using the grant instrument and using the high level of concessionality that can be provided. So concessionality, for example, in GCF, for public entity interest rate, it's 0.25%. For private sector, 0.75%. So less than 1%. So that's the level of constitutionality with the long term of payback with the grace period as well. So think about climate finance as an enabler with the constitutionality to be able really to crowd in and mobilize more capital. So at the end, you have a great pool of fund with a very cheap capital cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amgad. And now we are almost out. So George, you have a couple of minutes to share your feedback and close the session. Thank you.
So mine will be very quick. There's been a call for thinking about data. I think it's very important we know which data, because not all data is strategic. So it's also a question of which data. And I think that's also a discussion that we can have for a very long time that should be had, because not all data is strategic at the end of the day, and especially in doing, let's say, proposals, for example. The last comment is that we definitely need organized capacity. As we have seen, capacity is a big deal in all the utilities. So we need organized capacity, not just capacity. It should be organized. And that's it from my end, Julia. Please take it up.
All right, thank you. I wish we could continue actually for another hour, because it seems like that we have only barely scratched the surface in the time that we've had here. Thanks to everybody who's joined. Like I mentioned in the chat, we will collect all the questions and share it with the we will share it on our LinkedIn page, which is here presented on your screen. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.